thing I learned last night that we have more bacteria in our gut than we have cells in our body. So actually the bacteria outnumber us in a way. And the amount of bacteria in our gut is about the same weight as the size of our brains. So they always talk about the gut being the second brain, and I guess that's not too far from the truth. And people say, well, what effect does that have on me? Well, these bacteria do influence what we eat, our mood, our immune system, our health. We're in a symbiotic relationship with them. We can't poison them because they'll eventually get rid of us and go find a new host. So as I always teasingly say, my friend Richard always reminds me that the meaning of life is that we're hosts for bacteria. And that's really not too far from the truth. So a lot of what the Eat Clean, Get Lean program starts out with is weight loss. And but then we start to dive into improving your physiology, getting your hormones in balance, allowing your body to heal and to prosper and have optimal health and wellness. So in response to that, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the adrenal fatigue. And actually the title of our talk this week is Hormonal Response to Stress and Exercise. So I just wanted to, like I said, kill a few minutes there and tell you a little bit about what I did last night. The panel discussion was actually excellent. We had a medical panel after the movie. And for those who are interested in seeing the movie, it's still available for free. If you go to Keenan Fitness on Facebook, or if you go to my private Facebook page, you will see the link for boughtmovie.com or boughtmovie.net. And it's about an hour and a half, 2 hour movie. I'm not sure exactly how long it is. But it's very interesting to hear the different people who are being interviewed and what their research has demonstrated, and how important it is that we try to minimize our toxic load in our body. And some very interesting things going on in the legislature here in New Jersey. Just so everyone's aware that there's an assembly vote next Monday, and on the up for a vote this upcoming Monday is the parental choice for vaccines. Right now, as it is in the state of New Jersey, you have medical exemptions and you have religious exemptions, and the Senate earlier this week passed 5-2 to remove those exemptions, and the Assembly is voting next Monday. Governor Christie has already said that he will try to protect parents' rights to make decisions about their children. But whether you're pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine or anywhere in between or ambivalent, whatever, I think we can all agree that we probably are all very cognitive of what's best for our kids, and having parents maintain the right to make those decisions, I think, is something important I wanted to share with you. So if anybody has any questions or concerns, shoot me an email. You can Facebook message me, and I will give you whatever information you're looking for. All right, let's get started. So the first response to stress comes from the adrenal glands. And what are we going to learn tonight? We're going to do a little bit of an in-depth lesson about our adrenal glands. We're going to learn a little bit more about them. We're going to learn how adrenal stress impacts your thyroid, menstrual cycle, and so forth. And then we're going to talk a little bit about solutions on how to correct adrenal fatigue and to help us all prosper and achieve optimal health and wellness. So where are my adrenal glands and what do they do? Well, the adrenal glands are two small glands about the size of large grapes, and they sit over your kidneys. They are located towards the back of your body, near the bottom of your ribs on each side of your spine. So there's 4 things that the adrenal glands are responsible for. The first is the fight or flight hormones, which is your epinephrine, norepinephrine. They also help to regulate blood sugar, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the night. They also help to regulate blood pressure, and they also help to control your immune system. So we can see they have some very important roles. Now, before I go any further, let's just talk a little bit about fight or flight response. So, as I'm very famous for saying, let's turn the clock back 10,000 years and you're walking down a path and you run into a tiger. Well, you have a couple options here. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to freeze, like a deer in the headlights, so to say. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to take in your environment, see where you are, what's your situation, and start to look for an out. The second thing is your flight. It's a lot safer to run away and live to fight another day. So that's going to be what starts to happen. So your body starts to ramp up. You're getting that huge hormonal surge. Your body's ability to increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, allow the cells of your body to open wide open to allow sugar to pour into the cells as a readily available source of fuel. Sugar burns very, very quickly. It's good for quick response versus fat, which takes a lot longer to mobilize and burn. So your fight or flight hormones start this process up. And then, of course, if you can't run away and you have to fight, well, again, you start to get the muscles ramped up. And if you survive the encounter, then you have to heal. So during the struggle of a fight, there's going to be a lactic acid buildup. And that lactic acid is the trigger that unlocks the door, or the key that unlocks the door to all the healing compounds. So we'll talk a little bit about good stress with exercise, and we'll talk a little bit about bad stress with not exercising, being put in stressful environments, and how that affects the body. So just want to give you a little heads up on the fight or flight hormones. So what happens when the adrenals no longer function as they should? Well, the term that's been given to that, and it's a condition, it's not a disease because it's not permanent, is called adrenal fatigue. And adrenal fatigue is a collection of signs and symptoms known as a syndrome that result when the adrenal glands function below the necessary level for optimal health and wellness. So what are some common causes of adrenal fatigue? Well, prolonged stress, mental stress, physical stress, emotional stress, and stress like over-exercising. Now, what is an example of over-exercising? Over-exercising could be going out for a 10-mile run if you're not conditioned to do that kind of work. Now, I'm always famous for saying that runners are born, they're not made. I would say if the vast majority of my clients, if they came into my office and I told them we're going to start jogging, they'd never come back again. So if you tell me that if you don't go out for a jog, you're going to be very depressed and upset, well, then by all means, go out and jog. But for most people, jogging is not something that is optimal for them to help them to have optimal health and wellness, and that would classify as over-exercising for them. Extreme dieting, going from starvation type diets to overeating, that can cause adrenal fatigue. Blood sugar fluctuations can cause adrenal fatigue. Now, why would blood sugar fluctuations cause that? Well, as you're going to learn in a little bit, the adrenal gland's primary fuel source is sugar. So if there's not enough sugar available to optimally feed the adrenal glands, it's kind of like running out of gas and your engine starts to conk out, right, in the car. So if your blood sugar is erratic, it can cause adrenal fatigue. And then, of course, there's illnesses like respiratory infections, influenza, bronchitis, and pneumonia can also cause adrenal fatigue. So sometimes when people are experiencing adrenal fatigue, they often use coffee, colas, and other stimulants to get going in the morning and prop themselves up during the day. So again, these caffeine drinks act as a stimulant to try to get an adrenal response. Well, adrenal fatigue, as the name suggested, is a paramount symptom, and the paramount symptom is fatigue that is not relieved by sleep, but it is not a readily identifiable entity like measles or the growth at the end of your finger. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but you can certainly feel it's there. You may look and act relatively normal with adrenal fatigue, and you may not have any obvious signs of physical illness, yet you live with a general sense of unwellness, tiredness, or a gray feeling, kind of like a blah or a malaise, as we used to call it back in the 70s in physical therapy school. You have a feeling of general malaise. I remember my teacher talking about this. So how can I tell if my adrenals are fatigued? Well, you might be experiencing adrenal fatigue if you regularly notice one or more of the following. You feel tired for no reason. You have trouble getting up in the morning, even when you go to bed at a reasonable hour. You are feeling run down or overwhelmed. You have difficulty bouncing back from stress or illness. You crave salty and sweet snacks. Well, that makes sense, right? If your adrenals are looking for sugar, your body's going to start to crave something sweet. You feel more awake, alert, and energetic after 6 p.m. than you do all day. Isn't that interesting? And loss of libido. So the question is, does smoking increase susceptibility to adrenal fatigue? Well, the answer to that is yes. Smoking is a chronic stress on the body that makes it more difficult for the adrenals to function. Smoking by itself does not lead directly to adrenal fatigue unless the adrenals are already weak. However, smoking is one of the body's burdens that accelerate adrenal fatigue and prevent complete recovery from occurring. So there's another reason to not smoke. One of the things you have to realize too is the kidneys get about 20% of the blood flow from each heartbeat, and the adrenals are located just above the kidneys, so they're probably getting a lot of ancillary circulation as well. So what do we know about smoking when we talked about cardiovascular disease? We know that smoking, nicotine, causes swelling of the arterial lining. When your arteries start to swell, it makes it a little more difficult for blood to pass through. So you start to get an increase in blood pressure. Well, you also get a decrease in circulation. So if you're trying to move blood and sugar to the adrenal glands and you're smoking and it slows down circulation, it in turn is going to slow down the delivery of the macronutrients, the sugar that the adrenals need to function. It's all tied together. We're all one big machine that every part has to work in a synchronized manner for all the other parts to work effectively. If one's not working, then it's going to affect everything else. Kind of like the weakest link in a chain. Does adrenal fatigue affect the thyroid gland? Well, it probably is one of the principal things that does affect the thyroid gland. And it's amazing to me when people come and they've been given a supplement, whether it be a pharmaceutical or something else, to help them with thyroid dysfunction. And when I ask, well, when you had your adrenals tested, what was the outcome of that? And they said, well, they were never tested. So if the adrenals are causing a thyroid to become dysfunctional and you treat the thyroid, nothing's going to change. It's like trying to fix your engine, but there's a leak from your gas tank to the engine, and the gas isn't getting to the engine. So you can do whatever you want to the engine, but until you fix the leak in the gas line, the engine's not going to run. So many people experience adrenal fatigue also experience some degree of decreased thyroid function. People shown to be low thyroid, but unresponsive to thyroid therapy are most likely experience adrenal fatigue as well. So again, if you're treating the thyroid, you're not seeing any significant change, you have to start looking up the chain. For these people to maintain healthy thyroid function, the adrenals must also be supported in addition to the thyroid. Does adrenal fatigue affect a woman's menstrual cycle? Yes, adrenal fatigue can negatively affect many aspects of a woman's hormonal cycles, including menstrual flow, PMS, perimenopause, and menopause itself. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the different axes out there and how these systems all come and work together. So here we have a great picture. We have the brain and the pineal gland. What's really neat about the pineal gland is it's photosensitive. So if you're having trouble sleeping and there's a lot of light in the room, or you have the TV on, or you watch a lot of electronics, or you're using a lot of electronics, computer before you go to bed, you stimulate the pineal gland, it increases your cortisol levels, decreases your melatonin levels, and makes it very difficult to get some sleep. I thought that was just something to throw in there. So we have the pituitary gland, we have the hypothalamus, we have the thyroid and the thymus, we have the adrenal glands, and we have the sex organs, the ovaries and the testes. Ovaries, obviously, where estrogen is made, and testes, where testosterone is made. And just for the record, women do produce testosterone well, but not in the same copious amounts that men do. So these are a complex set of direct influences and feedback interactions between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, adrenal glands, and the gonads. This complex communication system is responsible for effectively handling stress by regulating the production of cortisol, neurotransmitters, and other key hormones. Now, remember we talked about, for those people who have been through our nutrition program, one of the things Susan looks at is your brain chemistry, and she looks at your neurotransmitters. And she's looking at things like acetylcholine and GABA. Okay, now Susan is more GABA. She's more laid back. She's more relaxed, right? And I tend to be more acetylcholine. I tend to be more of a type A personality. So those acetylcholine is more dominant with me, where GABA tends to be more dominant with Susan. Then you can see that reflected in our energy and our personalities. And of course, we also have serotonin and dopamine. Now, here's something interesting. Serotonin is one of those drugs that gives us a sense of well-being. And one of the things we discussed last night at the medical panel is that most of the serotonin that's produced in the body is produced down in the gut, okay, not in the brain as we always once thought. So if your gut is dysfunctional, okay, and you decrease serotonin levels, well, what does that affect? It affects concentration, your sense of well-being, and serotonin also has an effect on blood sugar, okay, which ties into this whole situation we're looking at now. Remember, we talked about how blood sugar is important with the adrenal glands. So we see people who are developing type 2 diabetes, and we're looking all over for cause, but very few docs are looking at digestion and how their decrease in serotonin from the gut is affecting their type 2 diabetes. So you just can't look at just one system. You have to look at all the systems and how they play together. So I know I'm turning this into a exercise physiology class here, but I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is give you an appreciation as to how all these systems work together. So you can see that you can't just isolate out the thyroid gland. The thyroid always tends to be the culprit in this. Now, I did send out a video the other day on metabolic syndrome, and I talked about the complex between the adrenals, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the thyroid, and then I took that all the way down to the muscle cells. And if you didn't get that, you can shoot me an email. I think I emailed it to everyone, but I'm going to go back and check my sent folder. But it's important to understand that when we start talking about weight loss, and we've been talking a lot about that over the last couple of weeks, if your adrenals are not functioning properly, and that in turn is affecting your thyroid, that's going to affect your body's ability to burn stored body fat for energy. Okay, so we have to address the adrenal function in addition to the thyroid function, and then we could start to investigate why you're either not gaining weight or not losing weight, rather. So this is where the coaching comes in. I guess that's what I was trying to get to. This is a 12-week coaching program. And if you're running into issues and you're not making changes and saying, well, I'm doing the shakes and I think I'm doing the exercises, but something's just not right because things aren't changing, this is where you need to get in touch with Susan and I. And after every Wednesday night, I do these talks, I say, okay, gang, I'm going on Facebook. I'll be in the Keenan VIP page, and you'll have access to that. you can go ahead and ask me a question, and this is where I can coach you. Or during the week, we can do coaching during the week. So I don't want anybody out there now that we're in week 9 and still like, I did really good in the beginning and now things aren't going well and I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Well, that's what you paid for. That's where the coaching comes in. So we really want to help you with that. Okay. So when it comes to weight loss, what were most of us taught along the way? We were taught to eat less, exercise more, and that equates to weight loss. Now, anyone who's been with me for the last 9 weeks knows this is not how it works. Because if it worked this easy, I wouldn't have a job. I'd be, working somewhere else, doing whatever. But so we know it doesn't work like this. So we need to address how it works. So let me see. Let's see. What did I put here? So let's see. When we don't change our sedentary ways and poor dietary habits, what would be the adrenal response to stress? Okay. Maybe I got a little out of line here. Let's talk a little bit about stress. I've been hinting at stress for a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about food. We'll get back to food in just a couple of minutes. So let's take a scenario that's probably not that uncommon to most of us. We're sitting in a stressful meeting. It could be a board meeting. It could be meeting with your children's teachers, and you're getting stressed. You notice that your heart rate starts to increase. You're probably going to get an increase in blood pressure. You might even start to perspire a little bit. You're going through a fight or flight response, and you're getting that hormonal surge of adrenaline and epinephrine. It's going to cause an increase in cortisol, increase in your hunger and your cravings, and your energy is going to go up temporarily. It may cause you to overeat in response to this. And also, in order to relieve the stress, some people turn to smoking or alcohol. And the adrenal response to this stress is to start to shut down because the body the adrenal glands can't handle this level of stress. Now, remember the scenario when we start talking about the stress from exercise and how it changes dramatically. So if you have chronic stress, whether it be physical stress or emotional stress or mental stress, what's so bad? What can happen? Well, adrenal fatigue can lead to something called metabolic compensation, and then eventually to the next level, which would be metabolic resistance. So we've talked about metabolic compensation before, how you start to lose weight, but then you stop losing weight, and now you're moving more into more of a metabolic resistance. So after chronic low-calorie diets and extreme exercise, which we see a lot of when people first come in, and of course the exact opposite, they eat more and they don't exercise at all. That can be very stressful. Weight loss plateaus and hunger and cravings increase while energy starts to decrease. Well, it all goes back to not keeping your HEC in check. Okay, hunger, energy, and cravings is our acronym for HEC. So people naturally reduce calories even more, which makes the metabolic resistance even worse. Okay, you're getting into this downward spiral. Now we're starting to see changes in brain chemistry, stress and moodiness, and hormonal imbalance. So what happens? You get decreased motivation and decreased self-confidence. So if you have decreased motivation and you have decreased self-confidence, what do most people do? They start to eat more and they stop exercising, because when you're hungry and you're stressed and you're fatigued, you have no energy, you have no motivation to exercise. Now, the next level is metabolic damage, and this takes a little bit of a longer period of time. This doesn't happen in days, but when Susan and I start to see these problems, this is usually where we're referring people back to physicians, because there might be some medical intervention that's required at this point. But a lot of what we're going to talk about in the next couple of minutes can be addressed with lifestyle changes, making sure you're properly hydrated, making sure you're getting adequate amounts of sleep, making sure you're using your rest and relaxation technique. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Making sure you're doing the appropriate level of exercise, and making sure that your body has proper nutrition. Excuse me. So what are some of the signs of metabolic damage? Well, again, we have adrenal fatigue, polycystic ovarian syndrome, Digestive issues, increased gas, bloating, constipation, or diarrhea. We start to see hypothyroidism. The thyroid starts to become dysfunctional because of the adrenal fatigue. What are some of the physical evidence of that? We see poor growth of hair and skin and nails. We start to see autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and fibromyalgia. And we start to see muscle wasting, and that starts to increase, and body fat starts to increase as well. And that's what people refer to themselves as being skinny fat. I got these thin arms, thin legs. I don't weigh a lot, but my muscle has no tone, and I just feel like I have no energy. Now, metabolic damage does not just occur in sedentary people who overeat and underwork out. And it just doesn't happen in runners either. You see a lot of metabolic damage in other performance athletes. So I'll give you a couple of examples that I saw through my athletic career in sports and in physical therapy. One of the things you see metabolic damage is in gymnasts, especially the younger girls, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, who are overtraining, under eating. And you start to see some other issues in addition to metabolic damage. You start to see osteoporosis. You start to ask the parents, has she started her menstrual cycle yet? And they're 13, 14, 15 years old, and they haven't. So that's indicative that their body is undergoing metabolic damage. The other place you see it is in people who perform in athletics who have to fit into a certain weight category. So if you're a boxer or you're a wrestler, you can start to see metabolic damage. Or if you're a bodybuilder and you're trying to get down to a certain look so that you can show your muscles and get as lean as possible, a lot of these performance athletes have metabolic damage. And we have a friend who was undergoing this, and she had competed in women's physique and figure competitions, and really went to very low carb diets and was overtraining and came up with metabolic damage. And she started to gain weight, and she just couldn't stop the weight gain from coming on. It got worse and worse and worse. And she ended up meeting up with Dr. Jade Teta, and through her, that's how Susan and I got to meet Dr. Teta. So it's amazing how things happen, because someone that we knew got ill and sought out the help of Jade and his brother Keone Teta to help with her metabolic damage. We ended up meeting him, and of course, everyone who knows Susan and I knows that we speak very highly of Jade and Keone and his wife Jill, and Keone's wife Jillian. They've been tremendous mentors to us and taught us a tremendous amount. So let's move on. So what's the solution? Let's get to that. Okay, so what do we teach at KM Fitness? We teach about balancing your metabolism, right? Naturally lowering your calories and then getting lean and staying lean, okay? So what does it mean to balance your metabolism? Well, we talk about our acronym, getting your heck in check, making sure that your hunger on a scale from 0 to 10 doesn't go above a 5, your energy is a 6 or higher, and your cravings stay below a 5. Okay, that's keeping your heck in check, and you're naturally starting to lose stored body fat, showing us a balanced metabolism. Things are working properly. When that starts to happen, because your body's working so efficiently, you will naturally lower the calories that you're taking in. You're not going to force it. It's just something you're going to fall into. And how do you know you're doing the right thing with the amount of food you're eating? Well, your heck is in check. You're losing weight, or you're maintaining a very healthy weight, and you have a very strong sense of well-being. And of course, that helps you to get lean and stay lean. So how do we get people there initially? You know, when they're coming to us and their food is all over the place and they don't know what to do with exercise, we go right back to our 3-2-1 program. We go back to 3 meals a day. The first 2 meals of the day being a protein shake or something like a protein shake. I'll get into that in a second. And a whole food meal. So how does Susan and I teach everyone how to make their protein shakes? What's the first thing we start out with in any type of meal? We start out with making sure you have adequate amounts of protein, fiber, and water, right? Three very essential things you need to start any healthy meal off with. In the case of a protein shake, we may use something like the ID Life meal replacement with the chia seeds and the lactose and casein-free whey protein powder, which is an excellent source of protein sweetened with stevia, right? That's one way. Some people have been using something called Plant Fusion. They seem very happy with that. We say that's another great tool to use. In our shakes, we always talk about the fiber content and some of the nutrient-rich green plant food we can use, so we can get our Vitamix or our Ninja or NutriBullet, whatever it is that can grind down things like kale and spinach and collard greens, right? We have tremendous green plant food in there. The other thing we always teach people for taste and to help balance out blood sugar is using something called branched chain amino acids, right? And there's a lot of good sources of that. And again, if you're not sure where to go, where to turn on this stuff, that's again where the coaching comes in. Just make sure you give me a call, and I'll be more than happy to show you a lot of this stuff. I have a lot of stuff on my table in the back room now, so people can come in and take a look. You can throw some ice in there. Some people, will go ahead and put a few blueberries or strawberries in it. That's fine, because those are very low glycemic fruits. If your goal is weight loss at this point in time through this process, you're not going to load it up with fruit. You're not going to put bananas in it, because that's going to throw off your blood sugar. It's not necessary at this point in time. So those are your protein shakes. And people say, well, Mike, I can't do protein shakes all the time. What are some other suitable exchanges for those? Well, of course, a nice, huge green salad with a protein, right? Those are excellent choices we could make. And again, we've talked a lot about this. I'm just kind of recapping a little bit. And then your whole food meal at nighttime. Remember that plate. Half that plate is going to be green, raw and cooked green vegetables. You can have your broccoli, your cauliflower, your Brussels sprouts, your collard greens, your asparagus, your cabbage. And Susan has provided tremendous recipes for all these vegetables to really make them tasty and palatable. I know people, when they first saw our recipe for Brussels sprouts, how we oven roast them, and then I put a little balsamic vinegar in a skillet on the stove, and I reduce that down, and I pour the Brussels sprouts in there and stir them around to give them a little coating. Even my kids love it. So half that dinner plate is cooked and raw green vegetables, salads, of course. And then, of course, we have our protein, 20 to 50 grams of protein, depending on your body weight. And you can have your carbohydrate. This is where we start bringing in the brown rice, the sweet potato, quinoa, that sort of thing. And of course, if your hunger, energy, and cravings are not in check, we start to increase the amount of fat in the meal. And if that doesn't work, of course, what do? We take the fat out. We add more carbohydrate in. If that doesn't work, we add the fat back in. So we've been through that a dozen times, but I figured hearing it one more time never hurt anybody. Now, as far as the strength training is concerned, earlier I talked about the lactic acid buildup and how that is the key that unlocks the door to all the healing compounds, the testosterone, estrogen, human growth hormone, and other tissue repair hormones. So again, we're going to go back to our 3-2-1. We're going to do our 2 strength training routines. How we went through the 4 exercises, the compound movements, and we tried to work a weight that we could lift 8 to 12 times to try to get us to temporary muscle failure, get that breathless and burning, the hot and the heavy, the 2 B's and the 2 H's, right? All these great acronyms we've come up with. And then the 1 hour of walking every day during the week. I did a whole webinar about 3 or 4 weeks ago just on the merits of walking and how that helps to balance out our blood sugar and balance out our hormones, and again, give us a tremendous sense of well-being, going back to our ancestral days. If our ancestors were out walking, that means that food was available, they were safe, and they were in a moment of prosperity. So we can reproduce that by going out and doing walking ourselves. So what is the adrenal response to the stress and the exercise? Well, again, our exercise is intensity based. We want to get an intensity to produce the increased sweating. That's the heat, increased heart rate, okay, increased blood pressure. We're going to get breathless and burning, hot and heavy. That increases our lactic acid response, and lactic acid helps to release the healing compounds of the body, increases testosterone, increases human growth hormone, helps us to accelerate fat metabolism. And that's the adrenal response to exercise and stress based on a healthy form of stress, not over exercising, but exercising with the proper intensity, making sure that we do our rest based training. Rest based meaning you go until you can't, then you rest until you can resume. I'm not trying to get you to quit, I'm trying to force you to rest. Okay, so if you have to rest, that means you've accomplished the breathless and burning by using a heavier weight, creating a lot of heat, getting that lactic acid response, and then, of course, you get the release of the healing compounds. And, of course, the restorative exercises, going for a massage, the Epsom salt bath jacuzzi tub, the warm water soaks, the saunas, spending time with friends, spending time with your pet, intimacy. All these things are restorative exercise. And again, just as a reminder, when we talk about food, how do we start off all our meals? Big rocks and little rocks. Again, if you're trying to fill up a jar and you got a bunch of big rocks, little rocks, pebbles, and sand, you got to put the big rocks in first, because if you fill it up with sand, there's no room for the big rocks to get in there. So our big rocks are healthy sources of protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And then the little rocks would be more like the vitamins and the minerals in the water. I'd also add fiber in there. Number 3 is supplements. One of the things we discussed last night at the talk was that a lot of the genetically modified organisms do not allow the plants to absorb the nutrients from the soil, especially the minerals. So Susan and I are very big advocates in this day and age of using proper supplementation to get optimal levels of our vitamins, our minerals, our trace minerals, all the things we need to have your body work in an optimal, healthy manner. Okay. And of course, going with free range, organic, when possible, grass-fed beef, grass-fed and grass-finished, healthy sources of, like I said, organic fruits and vegetables. These are all very, very important. Okay, so that's going to wrap up tonight's talk. I wanted to make sure that I gave everyone a kind of a working knowledge with regards to what adrenal fatigue is, and because I get so many questions about thyroid dysfunction. Now, questions do come up about other thyroid issues, and some of them are not driven by adrenal fatigue, but driven by an autoimmune disease. One of the things I can think of is Hashimoto's. And Dr. Jay Tita has Hashimoto's. And how does he address that? Well, obviously, he's looking to get with his diet. I'm just going to jump back to see if there's any questions, guys. I'm sorry. In the chat. Here we go. So if anybody has questions, the chat room's open now. And I'll just say hello. Dr. Jay Tita has Hashimoto's, and he treats it by eating grass-fed beef, wild-caught fish, free-range chicken, free-range eggs. Remember, it's not just what you eat, it's what you're eating ate. So if the cow the steer is being fed a grain and soybean and corn diet, which is not indigenous to cows. Cows are ruminants. They have 4 stomachs. They digest grass very, very well. Not just green grass, but all different kinds of grasses, onion grass and so forth. I'm okay? Good. Susan just walked back in to make sure that I was okay. So they're very good at digesting grass. They're not very good at digesting grain, and it causes a whole host of problems. So that's why we want to eat the proteins, the animal-based proteins that come from healthy sources, and avoiding things like gluten and alcohol and processed sugars, artificial sweeteners, getting off food chemicals and food additives. Any autoimmune disease is very easily remedied if you go to a very clean diet, get optimal amount of sleep, optimal amount of hydration, and the right exercise intensity. So I don't see any questions, so I'm going to call it a night, guys. Here I have 8:40. I did pretty good. I got it over in a little bit more than a half hour. That's really what I wanted to do. Again, I'll be in Facebook at the end of tonight's presentation. If anybody wants to ask me questions, if someone doesn't feel comfortable asking those questions in the forum, you have a kind of a private question you want to ask me, you can always shoot me a private message in Facebook or shoot me an email. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Susan says good night too. And we'll take it from there. Take care. Have a great night. Bye-bye.